Beta Upsilon Chi, Bucks, presents Man to Men, the premier audio journal for men who live faithfully and lead courageously. I'm Jared Musgrove, and today we welcome J.R. Briggs. Dr. Briggs is the founder of Kairos Partnerships, an organization committed to serving hungry leaders through coaching, consulting, and speaking. He also serves on staff with the Ecclesia Network and Fresh Expressions as a guest instructor for the Friends University in the Masters of Spiritual Formation and Leadership program. He's here today to talk with us about his new book, The Art of Asking Better Questions. JR, welcome to Man to Men.
Thanks so much for having me, Jared. I'm really looking forward to this.
Man, I've been looking forward to it too. I shared with you as we were pre-gaming a little bit here, and I shared with IVP, your publisher, that this is a book I've been waiting for a long time.
Well, it's very kind of you.
Talk about, you just hit it out of the park. So I'm excited to get into this. The subtitle of the book, I left out in the introduction because that's where I want to start. It's an incredible invitation. Pursuing strong relationships, healthier leadership, and deeper faith. Man, just what stirred in your heart to write The Art of Asking Better Questions, Pursuing Strong Relationships, Healthier Leadership, and Deeper Faith in this moment?
Well, this certainly has been a topic that I have been curious about for years. I've taken it seriously for the last 10, studying it and writing on it for the last few years. The reason being is I can't think of any section, sector, group, relationship, team, church, organization that wouldn't benefit from all of us asking better questions. And someone said to me recently, so who's this book for? And I said, well, if you've ever been asked a question, or plan on asking a question at any time in your life in the future, this book was written for you. Because I just can't see any sector where it wouldn't be helpful to learn to ask better questions. It sounds very Tony Robbins-esque on this, Jared, but if you change your questions, you change your life. Yes. And the better the questions, the better, the richer, the more, the higher quality your life and relationships and faith will be. I tell people, if you don't want to read the book, here's the thesis statement, the one sentence summary. The quality of our lives is determined by the quality of the questions that we ask God, ourselves, and others. Yeah. And so because of that, that's why I'm passionate about this idea of questions. Questions are everywhere.
Man, so you're saying it's all about the prompt, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just it's
sort of, I mean, it's a little bit of one of the universal principles of question asking in the world. If you ask a unthoughtful, generic question, how you doing? You're going to get an unthoughtful, generic answer. Fine. How are you? But if you ask a very thoughtful, specific, intentional question, what was the most interesting part of your day today so far? You're going to get a very interesting, thoughtful, high-quality answer. No one's ever asked me that before, but what's interesting is this thing. And then all of a sudden, you're connecting in a deeper way than hey, how you doing? Fine, how are you? And I just have found that universal principle to be true, that you ask more thoughtful questions, you get more thoughtful engagement, responses, answers, and connection. It's a beautiful part of questions.
And you argue a more quality life by asking quality questions. So
absolutely.
Let me ask you, because I think a lot of us, and this is the invitation of your book, is just a lot of us feel like we lack that quality of life in a culture that's just full of noise and honestly just bullet point answers. Yeah. Whether it's Google or chat, you're just asking for these answers that kind of line out for you. They may be right, they may be wrong, but it's informational. And we're looking for something more relational as leaders and as men. So how can a man, JR, reclaim sacred space through what I'll just call intentional inquiry? That's with God and with one another.
Yes, you're right. And Jared, you're exactly right. We don't have a shortage of information. We have a shortage of wisdom, of curiosity, and wonder. And asking good questions, unfortunately, is a lost art. And my desire is for it to be an art that we return to and that we raise that. So how do we grow in doing that as men? First of all, is being aware for the opportunity and the power to unleash there's a latent power that exists with questions. So just to be aware of it as men, number one. Number two is to actually realize that we live in a world that has conditioned us toward answers and toward convenience. Yes. And I know with your podcast, you get men who are speaking in to say we can't just go for what's easy and convenient. And so we've been taught to give the right answers, and yet little attention has actually been given to actually learning how to ask the right questions. And so if we can have a greater vision for our lives as men to realize that if I want a quality life, it means quality connection and curiosity and humility. And then therefore, how do we get there? I'm sort of working backwards. Then to say, okay, that means we're going to have to learn to ask better questions. So the first part is awareness. The second part is a desire. We've got to have a desire to want to have that kind of life. If we don't, I tell people, if you don't want to be changed by this, don't read this book, because I wrote this so that you and your relationships could be changed. And so awareness, desire, then once those two things are there, then we can teach the skills and the posture as to how we grow in that. But I have given up trying to teach the skills of how to do that if the awareness and the commitment aren't there at the beginning.
Right. Or the humility, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the 4 essential elements to asking good questions. You've got to have humility, but you also have to have curiosity and wisdom and courage. And all those are connected. I'm not sure how I can be wise if I'm not also humble. In fact, this morning, Proverbs 11, I was reading this morning where it says, humility brings wisdom, right? So if that's connected there, also curiosity. I can't be curious unless I'm first humble enough to realize I don't know the answer. And so I've got to admit by starting, I don't know, that I cannot be curious if I think I know all the answers. And then it takes courage because it's convenient to just say, well, whatever. It's also, it's a risk when we ask questions, right?
Yes.
We only grow when we're vulnerable, and questions can be vulnerable with one another, of asking them to be vulnerable, but also to admit, I don't know. And that takes a lot of courage to admit, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times why people don't ask. They're going to think I'm dumb. They're going to think I don't know the answer. Yeah, that's why we ask questions.
Do you think sometimes we avoid asking questions because we ourselves don't want to be asked?
If we're not careful, we can actually, some of the best question askers I know are actually doing it a little bit as a protective measure.
I see.
That if they're always the one asking the questions, then that means no one has time to ask me. And so, yes, it's also in asking, being really good at that, but also just saying, if I don't ask, they're not going to ask me. So we even have to say that's the courage to be known, to be seen. And by the way, there are times where, as much as I love questions, I'm not a flaming extrovert.
Right.
There are times where I want to sit on an airplane and get work done or read a book. I don't always want to engage with the person next to me.
Right.
Sometimes I do. And so then that's the wisdom that I need to determine, do I press in here or not? Do I just need to take a nap on this plane, or might it be wise for me to lean in with this person next to me who I don't know?
No, that's right. That's right. And one thing I enjoy about your book is that it's not just completely focused on you. What can I get out of asking questions? But you talk about, and you use one of my favorite quotes from David Brooks, where he talks about the difference between diminishers and illuminators. How does that play into asking better questions? How does that help us be an illuminator in others' lives instead of a diminisher?
Yes, I am a huge David Brooks fan. And when he wrote that, I thought, wow, I want to print this out and just put this on the bulletin board. It is so, so good. And he's right. There are 2 types of people in this world. There are diminishers that they just, when you're around them, you just feel smaller. You just feel cut down to size. And then the people that we love being around are the illuminators. And one of the things in the research that was really fascinating, Jared, is something that came from Charles Derber, who taught at Boston University. And he did this fascinating study where he was exploring, he was studying conversations. And he said conversations fell into 2 parts. One is what he called support response, and the other was called shift response. So shift response, he noticed, was where people are having a conversation and they might say, oh, what'd you do last night? Oh, I watched a horror movie. And a shift response says, well, I don't like horror movies. I like rom-coms. That's shifting away from that person and what they were doing into something else. My dad calls that stealing the ball when someone else is dribbling.
Somewhat egocentric, yeah.
Yes, yeah. And I shift it away from them and back onto me. That's a diminisher. A diminisher is very good of putting the arrows back on me. I'm the attention here. But an illuminator is one that when they say, oh, I watched a horror movie last night. Oh, interesting. Have you always been into horror movies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Support. I'm supporting what that person, the arrows are pointing to them and not to me. It's like, well, not really. As a kid, I got really scared, and I might follow up with another support response. Oh, really? What's a movie growing up you watched that really scared you? Or what is it behind horror movies that you really enjoy?
Right.
The support is on them. Once you see it, it's like the FedEx arrow. Mm-hmm. Once you see it or once you hear it of support response and shift response, you can't unhear it. It's everywhere. And the world in which we live, unfortunately, has trained us to be shift respondents.
Yes.
We need to be support respondents. And that's where we illuminate people in the conversation. I think I mentioned this in the book, but I swim 3 days a week at the Y. And so when I'm getting out, I just overhear the other guys in the locker room, and all they're doing is shift response. Hey, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I went fishing. Oh, well, I went hunting and I caught this. And oh, well, I went fishing. And it's okay to go back and forth, but they're just waiting until someone is done talking for them to share. But there's this one guy, a friend of mine named Brendan. He's a retired nurse. And Brendan is the perfect support respondent. He'll say, what'd you do this weekend? Oh, I went fishing. Oh, really? How'd it go? Oh, I caught a bunch. Oh, what was your biggest catch? Oh, I caught this big bass. Oh, do you often catch bass? Where do you like to go? Mm-hmm. And what is amazing is people, without even knowing it, they flock to Brendan. Brendan knows people's stories. He affirms them. Yeah. He is the illuminator at the YMCA. And I just say, we need more Brendans. We need to be like Brendan. And I asked him one time, how did you get to that point? Now, he's a nurse, so he's caring for people, in his career. Yeah. But he said, I had a family that was always incessantly curious, insatiably curious about other people. And he said, I think I just picked that up from my parents. Mm. I love Brendan. I love being around Brendan. Yeah. And other people do too. And so that's a very long answer to your short question, Jared. But the way we can connect with people, and it's all about arrows. Are the arrows pointing in? Look at me. Here I am. Or are the arrows pointing out? Look at you. There you are.
Right.
And if we can affirm the image of Christ in other people, if we can affirm other people, questions then become an amazing form of generosity. They become an amazing form of hospitality as well.
Yes, they really do. Invitational. You say in the book, I think it's early on, if I remember correctly, you tell us one of the most important questions to ask of yourself in being what we would call an illuminator, or someone who asks good questions, is, of what story or stories do I find myself a part? You say that questions remind us that we are in a story and we have a part to play in it. Mm-hmm. How does that impact how a Christian man asks questions of himself or others, JD?
So this is a big worldview question, right? So every one of us is walking around asking, am I a part of a bigger story? Am I the star in my show? Or is there some other show that I'm in? Is there some other story? And then therefore, what part do I play? And so I think it was Alistair McGrath and others who have talked openly and regularly about this idea of, I am a part of God's story. I am not the central figure, but I have an important part to play. And so therefore, when suffering happens or setback or hardship or failure happens, if I'm the center of my story, it's devastating and fatal. And it leads me to panic. But if I'm not the central figure in the story, and this is not my story primarily, I'm simply an important player in someone else's story and have a part to play, then my mindset shifts. The arrows can point outward. Meaning and purpose are found elsewhere rather than just in my accomplishments or my identity being in what I own, how I'm perceived, or how well I do something. And then all of a sudden, we shift into, and that's, the kingdom mindset that Jesus gives us, right?
Yes.
That's the story that we're in. We have a good and loving king, and we live in the unshakable kingdom of God. What a reality that is. Then says, I have a part to play as an agent in the kingdom of God, but I don't have to be the king. In fact, I shouldn't try to be the king, or I will wreck my story.
That's good. You've brought up several times Jesus as really the ultimate question asker. That was a big part of his ministry. And in the book, you play off this a little bit because Jesus asked, different kinds of questions, and you introduced different levels of questions. Some do gather information. Others really dig into what we've been talking about, identity and purpose. Could you unpack a couple of those levels for us and just share how maybe a college guy or a family guy or a manager at work might use those to grow spiritually and relationally?
Yes, this is one of the best things I found in my research. It came together, and I thought, ooh, this is something that's going to help me. And then I love being able to share that with other people. I really believe that all good questions, there are four basic levels. They're probably there's level 0 basement questions, which are really bad questions. Like, what were you thinking? Who are you? What's wrong with you? Those are destructive. But as far as helpful questions, I think there are 4 levels. Jared, you mentioned one already. Level 1 is just questions for simple information. They're just simple facts. You could ask a stranger on the street and it wouldn't be awkward. Excuse me, what time is it? Excuse me, I'm trying to get to this location. Is it down here to the left or to the right? Just very simple information transfer. It wouldn't be awkward to ask someone. Very straightforward, very transactional.
Right.
But level 2 is where you're going a little bit deeper. And that's questions not for information entirely, but for interaction. This is where you're exchanging thoughts and emotions. So it requires some initial relational connection with some trust, and engages the thoughts and emotions to build some connection there. So it could be, how are you feeling about today's meeting? Or have you always been interested in kayaking? It's not a ton of vulnerability, but I am sharing opinions or thoughts or feelings about that. And so that's a deeper level. But then there's level 3, and level 3 moves from interaction to more understanding. So this is where we're opening ourselves up with more feelings and desires. And this requires a lot of mutual trust and vulnerability. So there's got to be some relational story that we've connected. And it could be in 15 minutes or 15 years, but we wouldn't ask a stranger a level 3 question right away. But it's going to require a little bit more. Like, what do you really want in life? Or what are some of your deepest fears as you think about your kids getting older? You dropped out of college to pursue other things. Do you ever regret that? If you stayed in, what do you think you'd do with that? Right? You wouldn't ask a stranger that, but there's got to be relationships there. So it's hopes and dreams. And then level 4, and this is the highest level that requires the most vulnerability. So it's a smaller circle of people that you would ask. This is for transformation. So this is vulnerability and intimacy. This kind of plumbs the depths of human experience. So it might be questions like, when do you feel most fully seen? What are you afraid to tell me in this moment? And again, it's reserved for accountability partners or best friends or a counselor or a pastor or spouse. Very few people. What I've found, Jared, too, when it comes to the 4 levels, is you can only move to the next level when enough trust is established. If there's not trust, it's awkwardness. And I think we've all been in those situations where someone asks a question and you're like, whoa, that's a little creepy. Or you think, I'm not ready to go there with you. We don't know each other well enough. On
especially
the flip
as guys.
side, especially as guys, especially as guys. On the flip side, however, there are sometimes, and I think I've seen guys do this more than females, and that's that someone for 15 years, but you realize other than the weather and sports, you really don't know them. Why is that? Well, I think it's oftentimes because we've only been hanging out at level 1 and maybe level 2, and we haven't taken the risk, here back to courage again, to go to level 3 to take a little bit of a risk to go deeper. And that's where we need wisdom to say, is there enough trust established? And then we need courage to say, hey, can I ask you a little bit of a deeper question? And a little bit of a deeper question. Whether that's evangelism, whether that's a good friend, whether that's we're dating someone and it's moving toward marriage, but we've got to take those levels in. So if you think about it, kind of entering a lake, level 1 are like ankle deep questions. You're touching the water, but you're not really immersed in it. It's there. You're experiencing the water. Kind of thigh level, knee level would be level 2. Level 3 might be like waist or chest level. But level 4 is where you're swimming out in the lake and you can't touch the bottom.
All in.
All in. Absolutely all in. And by the way, all of those are important. And the goal is not to move everyone from level 1 to level 4. That's, I think, a very unhealthy dynamic of
Oh,
relationships.
yeah. You can't possibly handle that level of depth with all your relationships, right?
Yes. And it's a bit of a dance, Jared, especially with guys, to be able to say, hey, we got to start with level one. Hey, you going fishing this weekend? Okay, great. And then level two, getting into more of those. And what do you love most about fishing? And then it's, what do you think about most frequently when you're fishing? And why do we need these spaces for us as guys to just connect in a boat? Why is that important for us? Why do you think God's wired us in such a way that we enjoy these types of connections? That's where we can really be more thoughtful. And again, the better the questions, the better the engagement.
What questions have you found that help lead to deeper trust, JR?
Yeah, a lot of it is contextual. So that's often a hard one to answer. It's a great
There's
question.
not a top 5 or whatever.
Yeah, and part of it is am I with all guys? Am I in mixed company? Is that with people who are followers of Jesus? Is that with children? And so that's where that wisdom comes into play of who's in the room, and even asking, which I haven't always been good at this. My eagerness for questions can override sometimes my awareness to realize not everybody wants to be asked these questions right now.
Man, no, my wife is singing your praises right now. She's like, listen, this is not an interview.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And you're very good at questions, Jared. And I can see that this comes naturally to you.
You're kind.
I know it's your experience and background as well. But you're right. We've got to have that awareness to realize this may be a good question. This may be the wrong time. This may be a really good desire on my part to want to know someone. It may not be the right person. They just don't have a desire to be opening up the way I maybe want to open up with them.
Right.
And I need to respect that. And that's okay. But I can at least try. That's the risk we need to take. We may take a risk, and that's okay. But we can't be so afraid to never take them, or we'll just have shallow relationships.
You've been doing this a long time, JR. Does it ever lose that edge? Does it ever feel not risky?
It's a great question. It always feels risky, but it's oftentimes moved from capital R to lowercase r.
Yeah.
It's always there, but again, anytime there's vulnerability, there's always risk. And so to me, if I know that the only ways that I grow is through vulnerability, and the only way I can be vulnerable is through risk, then I'm going to have to choose to live a life that's full of risk. And it doesn't mean capital R risk, jump off off a platform or something all the time with a parachute on my back. But
I think there's some dudes who would rather do that than be asked some of the questions that are in your book or that we've covered here on this podcast.
Yes. And that's then the questions we ask ourselves is to say, why is that? Why would I rather jump out of an airplane, or bungee jump or whatever, than ask questions with another dude? It could be, I don't know what to say. Okay, that's fine. That's good to name. It could be, I'm afraid that you're going to use this information. If you ask me what I think, you're going to use this information, dip it in kerosene and light it on fire. You're going to torch me with it. It could be, man, I don't even know how to do this. I didn't have a family or a dad that grew up and asked me questions. So I don't know. I'm afraid I'm going to look incompetent.
Yeah.
And so I think even asking ourselves that question, what is holding me back? What are my fears? And is it worth it? Now, I'm convinced it's worth it, and I hope the book persuades people that it's worth it. But I still think we need to ask ourselves, is it worth the risk?
That's good. You spend a lot of time coaching leaders across the country, which I think gives you an amazing purview on this. What is a question or series of questions that you see consistently tends to open the door as someone is growing in their leadership or their spiritual life?
It's a great question. I won't give you one, Jared. I'll give you a handful off the top of my head, because again, so much of it depends upon context. And people that want to grow in their question asking, one of the things I recommend at the end of the book is develop a list of some of your favorite questions. Have them in your back pocket.
Good.
So I have sort of what I'll call party conversation questions in my back pocket, but I also have coaching questions that I know, ones that work well with leaders. And so I won't pull them all out, just like I don't pull every tool out to fix a nail,
Yeah.
I got to have the wisdom to know which ones to pull out. But here are a few of them. And some of them I've stolen from other people and borrowed from them. And so you don't have to create all your own. But Oliver Sacks asked, what is it like to be on the other side of me?
Mm.
And to me, that's a really good question because, especially with men and with leaders, self-awareness is so important.
Oh, yeah.
And the way we grow in self-awareness is to have regular feedback loops. And regular feedback loops gives us that awareness to deepen our emotional intelligence.
Mm.
And similar question is, when I walk in the room, what walks in with me? So if I turn it on them, so I'm curious, when you walk in the room, what walks in with you? I'm noticing courage. Most people don't need more information when I'm coaching them. Sometimes they need models and perspective, but oftentimes they need courage.
Yes.
They have all the information. They just don't want to act it out. So I'll say, if you had 10%, just 10% more courage in this situation, what would you do? And whatever their answer is pretty good, pretty darn good. And I say, well, okay, if you took your own response there and lived into that, how would that feel? And so some of those just open up possibility. One of my favorite ones is from Michael Bungay Stanier, who's also a coach, and he calls it the AWE question, AWE. It just stands for, and what else?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes the best idea is not the first one. It's not even the second or third. It's often the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. And so someone says, well, what are your options? Well, I could do this. Oh, and what else? And what else? Are there any other options? And what else? And oftentimes they get to clarity at the fourth, fifth, or sixth time I ask that question, and what else? So there are several more I could give, Jared, if you want, but that's probably enough here. But it's a great question.
I'm picking up a
and
pattern.
I encourage everybody to make sure they have their own set of questions to think through too.
No, I'm picking up a definite pattern of you are leading someone somewhere, not like leading the witness or anything like that, but you're wanting to lead them down a path of some discovery and hopefully give them a really good gift, courage and self-awareness, which are difficult. You can't wrap those up, and you can't pass that on to somebody. It really is something God has to do. But what I'm learning from you, JR, is that we get to be that guide sometimes, and our questions can be one of the best signposts that someone could run into.
Yes, and back to courage there, Jared. We've got to be willing to go first. I think the importance of being a man and a Christian man is not all of us are called to be capital L leaders, but leading others by taking the initiative and taking the risk. Will people sometimes look at you and go, I don't want to ask questions right now? Like, okay, fine. But can I take that risk to say it's still worth it for me to live an intentional, thoughtful, proactive life? As John Ortberg said, nobody floats into deep commitment to Jesus.
True.
I would also think the same thing is true. Nobody drifts or floats into deep, meaningful relationships. You don't wake up one day and go, I don't know how it happened. I just got a really healthy friendship with this person that's, no, it takes intention. And so nobody drifts into that. And which means we've got to be aware the current is taking us out to sea to say, just live surface lives at a distance with others. But we've got to be the kinds of people that actually press in against the current and move toward that, not floating or drifting, but being intentional with our paddles in the water.
Oh, that's good. And really leads me to another question I had for you is, what's your hope, JR, for a man who wrestles with some of the questions you give in the book? And you even give us an entire appendix of things to consider, which is really worth the price of admission. But what's your hope for a man after reading it, after walking away from it? What's the lasting motion you want to see in his heart and life after engaging with your work?
Such a great question, Jared. Thank you for asking that. People have said to me, why do you write? And I say, I write because I want my writing to change people. And so you're setting this up well. I do want people not just simply to be informed, oh, that was nice. I want them to be changed in how they have a relationship with themselves and how they engage with that little voice in their heads, right? And I want them to have a changed relationship with God, that God is not scared by questions. God asks many questions. Why would the God of the universe, who knows everything, ask questions? Because he longs for connection with his creation and relationship. And so when we ask God questions, I don't think he's scared away by those. I think he is honored and drawn into those based on the questions we see throughout Scripture and in the Psalms. So I hope it gives people permission to ask questions of themselves and ask questions of God. And then, of course, that they learn to ask questions of others so that they're marriages and their relationships with their children and their interactions at work, that they add immense value in their places of work, in their neighborhoods, and that they just can say, I've got some really deep, long-lasting relationships with other guys. As we know, guys are lonely. Most guys can't name 3 close friends.
Yeah.
And I think if we got better at deepening our love for and curiosity and priority for questions, we learn how to ask better questions, and then found and prayed for others who are curious as well, that God will surprise us with some of these relationships that we have.
Man's Men is made possible in part by our partners at Southern Seminary. Guys, when your ministry calling is serious, the people who prepare you matter. At Southern Seminary, you'll study under pastors, scholars, and faithful leaders who've guided generations of gospel ministers. They are known for teaching God's word with clarity and for living it out with integrity. If you're ready to be trained by a trusted faculty for a lifetime of faithfulness, start your MDiv at Southern Seminary. Visit sbts.edu/MDiv. If you're up for it, JR, I'd love to transition into a segment of the show we do called Everywhere, Every Day. It's a more personal conversation just to connect with our guests on how they live and move and be. Some of it really is just born out of my own curiosity. It's like, what do different dudes do all day?
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, let's start at the beginning of the day. What time do you get up in the morning, and what are some of the first things you've got to do?
Yeah, great. My alarm rings at 5:55. My wife is already up. I go down and grab some coffee. We pray together for a few minutes on the couch, and then I go straight to my to the sunroom, to my reading chair where I'm in the Word. I'm journaling. I start with my gratitude journal. I'm in one Psalm, one Proverb every day, and I've been hand copying the entire New Testament. I've got 5 chapters left of Revelation before I finish the New Testament.
What a
so
gift.
just 10 verses a day. My son is up. Get ready, take him to school. And then normally go to the gym to swim or run or lift. And then coaching leaders, consulting, working with leaders from about 9 to anywhere between 4 and 6 p.m. And constantly in conversations with individuals. And then at night, some of it's, our oldest son just went off to college, so it's a little bit quieter at home right now. But, running our 15-year-old around to different activities or places with his friends or track practice or whatever it might be. So hopefully finding a little bit of a Phillies game as well. We're big baseball fans here at our house here in Philadelphia.
That's good. No, hometown team. Yeah. Man, so it sounds like you're coaching a lot of leaders. Just practically, the thought that fills my mind is that you're probably on a lot of these Zoom calls. How do you fight off the Zoom fatigue, or just like, gosh, it's just what we have to do? But how do you interact with that?
Yeah, great question. I am so much of an analog person that we all got Zoom fatigue during the COVID era. I think that my COVID era muscles with Zoom actually got better. I can withstand it a lot more now. I still prefer in person, but I think I'm opening up more to the fact that you can really have meaningful connections. Nothing replaces face-to-face incarnational time with people, but that you still can have very meaningful interactions and relationships. Lives can be changed via Zoom. So that's even been hard for me to acknowledge over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But I do think it is important as I've seen leaders grow. I've grown. And so that's been an important piece as well. But yeah, I have a big monitor, just on a very practical side, a very big monitor. So it helps with the eye strain that I'm not looking on my MacBook, much tinier in the corner here. So that helps. But breaks between, I drink about 100 ounces of water a day. And so that means just about every hour I'm needing to take a bio break.
Like clockwork. Yeah.
Yes, almost on the hour. And so for me, that just allows me to get up and move around and have a bit of a break. Some leaders prefer phone. And when they prefer phone, I almost always take that as a walking meeting. I will put my AirPods in and I will go for a walk out in nature while I'm having this coaching call with them. If it's in person, I will also say too, do you want to meet in my office, or do you want to go for a walk? And so I try to break that up as much as possible on that.
No, that's good, man. Super practical. Thank you. Like I learned a few tips from there, because I find myself increasingly on these meetings. Bucks is a national organization, and I am limited to one space and time here in Dallas Fort Worth.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, you talk a lot in the book about stories. I'm curious on what are the stories that you enjoy the most, and I'll kind of give you three. I'd love to hear them from you.
Mhm.
What are the Bible stories or people that you find yourself in the most? Who are fictional stories or heroes that you've got, and then historical can be anyone from Abraham Lincoln to your grandfather. But yeah, Bible fiction and history. What are the stories that captivate you the most that you want to live into?
Yes. I'm not sure I want to live into it. I want to learn
Oh,
from it. But
that's
my
true. Yeah.
favorite Old Testament story is the story of Jonah. I cannot get away from that book. Those 48 verses over 4 short chapters.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I learn something new each and every time.
Yeah.
And the teaser I give people is the least dramatic thing in the book is Jonah being swallowed by a big fish.
Mhm.
There are so many layers to that, but that's the only thing we really think about with Jonah.
Mm.
Everyone changes in the book of Jonah except one person,
Yes.
Jonah.
Yes.
Everybody else changes. Even the worm, the wind, the water, the big
true.
fish, the pagan sailors, the king of Nineveh, everybody changes except one person, and it's Jonah. And we never know what happens to him.
Right.
We can assume he changed if he wrote the book, that he would be so self-effacing that he would make himself look like a fool so that God could look great. So we can assume if he wrote it, he did change. But there's not entire evidence as to did Jonah actually write the book. We think he did.
Right.
But it also ends in a question, by the way. And I think it's fascinating, the whole book, and we miss this. It ends with a question of God saying, should I not care for this great nation and this city of Nineveh of 120,000 people who don't know their left hand from their right? Should I not care for them? And then he adds this weird phrase at the end, including the animals.
Yes.
That's how it
Yeah.
ends.
That's
It's
it.
a question.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
cliffhanger. So you can tell I'm pretty passionate about this.
I
That
love it.
story is great. I love the Jonah story. And I love the parables of Jesus. Nothing grips me more of trying to understand the kingdom more than trying to just immerse myself and imagine myself in the different parables. So can't get enough of the parables, even the
Beautiful.
ones that make me scratch my head and say, what
Right.
the heck is
Right.
that about?
Right.
I still am drawn in to want to know more. So there's that. My second answer is going to disappoint you, Jared. I love reading, but I very rarely ever read fiction.
Oh,
And so
that's a lot of guys. Yeah.
and so I get criticized by people that love reading. You're not really a reader.
Well,
You don't
let's
love
bump
it,
it.
but-
Let's bump it out a little bit. Then it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be just a fiction book. Is there
Mhm.
a movie or a show that you're just thinking, man, this is a master story or set of characters for me?
Yeah, I don't have one in mind in particular, but I know the genre that moves me to tears, and it's the they have to be realistic. I don't love sci-fi. And so they've got to be realistic that they actually could happen or they did happen. And it's based on a true story of overcoming immense adversity by sticking to your principles and your convictions, even when everyone turned their back on you and you were alone.
Yeah.
That you still persevered.
Yeah.
And then in the end, you receive some sort of appreciation or reward or good consequence because you stuck by your principles and you didn't give up. There's something about faithfulness and discipline, even standing alone, that grips me immensely.
A word we've used a lot, courage.
Yes, yes. Immense moral courage in being faithful and sticking to things that are right, even if it's the hardest path forward. So that kind of genre will always move me to tears because I think my prayer is, Lord, I want to be that. I want to be that kind of man. So that's that. As far as, oh man, there's so many stories. I do love reading lots of biographies. Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt. I'm currently reading a Harry Truman biography because I just visited the Harry Truman Presidential Library just outside of Kansas City not too long ago.
Oh, fun. Is it the McCullough biography or a different one?
No, it's a different one called The Accidental President, where it only covers the first 4 months of. It's amazing what he had to do after FDR died in 4 months in world history. And I'm becoming convinced, as the author's trying to convince me, we aren't giving Truman enough credit on the world stage, how many decisions he had to make. And again, he was a total accident. He didn't even know he'd be picked to be vice president. In fact, when FDR picked him, he said, I don't even know much about Truman. So he was picked. And then a few months later, FDR dies. And then all of a sudden, he's thrust at the end of the World War. It's crazy. And so I'm thoroughly enjoying that story. And this one, a leader I respect deeply recommended this book. I haven't started it yet, but he said, you're going to love it. And it's the story of Genghis Khan and how he was an immense leader. Yeah, he said it's one of the best leaders he's ever studied was Genghis Khan. And this guy studied thousands of leaders. And I said, okay, you've got me. I'm gonna buy the book and check it out. But there's one, and I'm going probably pretty long here on my answer, but I love reading. There's a great book, and it's about Sir Ernest Shackleton, and it's called The Endurance.
Yes,
and it's a book by Alfred Lansing. It is, most leadership books are about war or about sports. And what I appreciate about this biography and this leader that gives us tons of principles, it doesn't come from sports or military. It comes from a guy who wanted to take a trip down to Antarctica to be the first person in Antarctica. And the harrowing details. Yes. Unbelievable story. So I normally don't like to read biographies multiple times. I have read that one probably 5 or 6 times.
Okay.
It is so good. So that story grips me immensely.
Oh, I sent his original poster, wanted men, for this, that, and the other thing. Glory may come if successful. That I sent that poster to my best friend the other day. So
is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let me turn it on you, Jared. I'm curious. What about you? What are some of the stories that have gripped you, whether biblical stories or fiction or nonfiction?
Biblical story, I would just say that I will probably forever be in at least, there's 2, maybe 3 books of the Bible that I just can't get out of. One of them is Samuel. Just the entire book, we call it 1st and 2nd, in the Tanakh, it's one book. But it's the David story. It's the fullest life we've got in Scripture. And so that means something. Like we ought to take some cues from this and learn from this. And as you said earlier, I don't always want to live into the David story, but I do want to live into the heart of David, for sure. But probably 2 of the most important people to me historically are Samuel and Jonathan. I just those 2 men affect me very deeply every time I read or hear those stories, because I see the courage of Samuel, his even just from when he became, I guess, answered God's call when he was young. I was very young when I felt called to the faith, and I very much resonate with 1 Samuel 3 and Samuel's calling. I do feel, I do feel very personally ministered to and called by God, a lot like he did. It's like I hear his voice. I feel like I walk with him. But I also love, and the House of David series brings this out, is like, hey, Samuel wasn't just some doddering old man. It's like, you don't mess with Samuel. He was judge of Israel. Like, the guy did some things,
A man's man.
he really was like, I love learning more about Samuel. I love how the show portrays him so far. And then Jonathan's just maybe one of the greatest men of honor I can think of. A man who just really had to thread the needle on laying down what could have been his own dynasty, recognizing, no, you're God's choice, and I want to walk with him, and that means that I'm devoted to you in David. And I just, man, I can't think of a more selfless man in Scripture. I want to be like that. Like, I want to be a friend like that. So everything in Samuel, I just can't get out of that story. I don't think I ever will. And then Proverbs, you mentioned it earlier, but Proverbs, I dug into it probably about 10 years ago and just can't get out of it, because it's not just randomly arranged. There's a story going on in Proverbs from the time you are in your parents' home with your father to you get out in those warrior years. And it's just, you've got 35 wisdom decisions you got to make every day. That's what life is like. You get into that, like Proverbs 25 through 29, I call those the leader Proverbs or whatever, those were gathered by Hezekiah when he had to lead a faithful reform in the kingdom. So I always go there when I've got a leadership decision. There's something there for me. And then, I want to I want to end my life like a Proverbs 30 or 31. Proverbs 30, you've got an old sage who's just sitting there going like, man, all I've learned is that I know nothing, but I know this. I know God's real and I know he's involved. And then I've got a beautiful wife, man, and she is a Proverbs 31 woman. So I read that. I can't get out of those books. I could go on and on. I love First John. That's where I go when I'm feeling particularly sinful.
Mm.
I just feel really, really messed up and kind of past forgiveness. Grandpa John just takes care of me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
those are
that's
places I go.
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, is it all right if I ask you a couple more follow-up questions here,
I'm
Jared?
in, man.
It's very clear to me of the interviews that I've done. You care deeply about asking good questions. You're passionate about this. You work on it. You're intentional about it. So, where did that come from? Was that
Gosh.
modeled for you? Did
Yeah.
you learn that in college, in school, formally?
That's good.
Where did your desire and skill for asking good questions come from?
I think I'm naturally a curious person. Um, I think that's where it starts. I don't know that humility always comes along with that, but I hope so. I hope so. I think even when I was younger, I remember wanting to learn not even necessarily the mechanics of how things worked, but I was very interested in people. And I think that some of that was cultivated. My parents I grew up on classic movies, and a lot of my favorites are still way back there. I mean, Jimmy Stewart's my favorite actor, so that'll tell you kind of where I land on movie night. But I think just watching those and seeing some of the characters there. I remember in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart's character is talking about why he approaches life differently, and he goes, "You've got to be curious about people. Why do different people tick the way they do? You've got to want to learn that," and that stuck with me. So that'd be a genesis, and then I would say that led me on to a journalism degree where it's like literally you're just teaching me to ask questions. At its best, that's what good journalism is. It's like we want to ask questions to get clarity so we can make good decisions. And I found out there, it's like, man, I really like doing this. I like finding out what different people think and how they tick, and it's just taken off from there. The Bible, as you've already mentioned here, invites us to ask good questions, and I think I wouldn't have been able to tell you that when I was 15, but I can look back and say I was always very, very drawn to knowing more about God, knowing He was unafraid of my questions, and then I'm deeply relational. I'm like you. I'm introverted. I'm getting on a plane here in a couple of hours. I'm not looking for a conversation today. Like I'm not. I got some things I want to think about and think about deeply. And planes are great places to do that. It's not always the case, but those are things that are very important to me. And relationally, I just don't know a better way to get to know a person.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And if I could, Jared, one more question in that as a follow up. So you're convinced of the power of questions. You've been curious, which is great. What is one skill that maybe you learned in your journalism degree that most people haven't had a formal or academic setting? What is one skill or assignment or impulsive
Hmm.
intuitive practice that's in you that was instilled through your academic career
Yeah,
that might be helpful for us
yeah.
who haven't had that privilege?
Man, writing is work. It really is. Like you don't just sit down, and this as an author. Like getting a book published. I mean, Jr. You've worked on this for years. You have wrestled it to the ground. It probably 2 years minimum from you sitting down to type the first words to what we're holding in our hand right now. You know, so I learned in journalism. It just taught me to bear down. I think I had a fairly decent work ethic growing up. I think some things like particularly just like running track. Playing football, I think that taught me some hard work, but journalism really taught me how to think. And one of the gifts of God to me in it was that I grew up a church punk. I just did. Became a believer early on. When I wanted to stray in junior high and high school, man, I could feel the Lord's shepherd staff just right there on my shoulder, just going like, "Nope, buddy, not going to let you go over there." Sometimes frustrating. But when I got to college, I was not, I was at a major secular university, University of Oklahoma. It's a number one media program in the country. So all kinds of people. And I enjoyed learning about them. I did not see their their non-belief as a threat. I actually found it really refreshing, and I loved being around non-Christians predominantly for a good portion of my classes. And that was a gift it gave me, and something that I still kind of miss, being in the church for 20, 25 years. I'm mostly around Christians, and I love them. I feel like I'm called to shepherd the flock of God. And yet I I found out that I really do enjoy being around people who have questions about the Christian faith, or maybe wonder why we tick the way we do. So those were gifts that it gave me: hard work and maybe just increased curiosity where I didn't have it before.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for asking, man. Let me wrap up here. What are some favorite podcasts or media that you're enjoying right now? Guilty pleasures are welcome, JR.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. I do love Russell Moore's podcast on Christianity Today. Very good.
Yeah, we just had him on. We had him on last year.
Yeah, he's very thoughtful, and what I appreciate about him is thoughtful and winsome, and he's willing to listen to different voices and learn from them. It's just I appreciate that spirit. There's something called the podcast called The Knowledge Project, where Shane Parrish interviews all sorts of leaders from around the world in various fields and says, what makes leaders tick? How did they get to where they are? There's another good one called How Leaders Lead, by David Novak. He used to be the CEO of Yum Brands, which included like KFC, Pizza Hut, and he's absolutely a great interviewer. Absolutely fascinating. So those are a few podcasts that I've always got going on in the background. Paul Miller from cjesus.net, The Praying Life. I really appreciate his podcast as well. So, and then I mentioned I'm a baseball fan. I do love minor league baseball. I used to be a minor league mascot for the Rockies AAA team for 5 years. And so there's sort of minor league, and it's called Baseball by Design. And so they basically interview the directors of these minor league baseball teams that have goofy names. And, there's a lot of goofy names for minor league teams. So the first half is just talking about how did you arrive at the name of your team? What's the history behind it? And the second half is they interview the designer of how did you then design the cap, and why did you pick those colors, and how did you listen to the community enough to connect that little detail to that?
Oh, wow.
And so it's just kind of a fun thing to have on when I'm mowing the grass. It's called Baseball by Design. So I love design, and I love baseball, and I love the history of how baseball happened. And so it kind of all combines that into one podcast. It's really fun.
Thank you. Another reason I ask is because I can't get enough. So you've given me at least a few that I'm going to go add when we get off here.
Yeah, good. Yeah. What about you? What are your top one or two?
Oh, man. So I enjoy The World and Everything in It, just for news and things of that nature. This is, we talked earlier about like there's some questions that are like a little too vulnerable. It's like I might rather jump off something than answer them. It feels very vulnerable when my podcast listening or my Spotify playlists are put out there in public. So right now, we have for years gone to the Disney parks, and so it's called the Jim Hill Media Network or whatever, but they do a lot of behind the scenes stuff about kind of the Disney parks. that industry is really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I'm not a Disney adult, guys. So, I don't have a goofy leather jacket over here, or, and I don't have a shelf full of popcorn buckets or anything here in the study, but I do enjoy learning about the creative and leadership processes that go into the parks. So that's one that I'll listen to as I'm mowing the lawn or whatever. And then I'm a big fan of, this will be that you won't enjoy this one. It's a fiction book. You remember the movie Master and Commander?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With Russell Crowe. So there's a series of 20 novels with that character,
right?
That ship. I mean,
wow.
It's really, such incredible insights on humanity. But I've done one circumnavigation, as the fans call it, of that entire series so far. I'm on my second, but there's a supporting podcast called The Lubber's Hole. It's a sea term, guys. Don't go there. But I enjoy listening to that one. They're basically just recapping the books. So I enjoy those. And then, I've not gotten out of my Tim Keller era or phase. I feel like a lot of us of our generation, we kind of feel like we came and, oh yeah. I learned what I need from him. Man, I just really resonate. So when that Tim Keller sermon downloads, I always enjoy that. That's a few of them. Great. I've probably got others that, different news podcasts and stuff, but Sooner Sports, big OU Sooners. So that's my sports jam over there, college football. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing.
Well, JR, as we sign off today, you've got thousands of faithful men who love Jesus, who pray.
Mm.
And they're listening to you as they're mowing the lawn, or they're showering, or they're working out, or commuting. How can we be praying for you right now, man?
Yeah, the prayer that I pray for myself, almost more than any other, as a human and as a leader, is, Lord, would you grant me wisdom, courage, and compassion?
Mm.
And I just pray for those because I want to do everything I can with wisdom. So I pray James 1:5 regularly. And, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously and without finding fault, and he will do it. So I want to take God up on that promise. So I pray for wisdom, pray for courage, right? Another word for courage can be faith. And so, Lord, would you deepen my trust and my faith as I step out in courage? And then compassion. John 13, I don't want to be 1 Corinthians 13, I don't want to be a resounding gong. And so, Lord, make everything in my motives to be rooted in compassion, love for you, love for others. And so I just pray, Lord, would you give me equal measures of wisdom, courage, and compassion? So I would just invite you and others, if you're willing to pray for me, to pray into those three things, that I would be a wise, courageous, compassionate human, husband, father, dad, leader, child of God.
Amen, bro. Well, you've got some brothers praying for you right now as they heard those
Great.
words. The book is The Art of Asking Better Questions. Guys, I can't recommend it to you enough. You've heard just a little bit of it here today. J.R. Briggs, thank you for joining us here on Man to Men.
Thanks, Jared.
Man to Men is powered by Beta Upsilon Chi, commonly referred to as Bucks. Everywhere, every day, Bucks men are raising families, leading in organizations, and strengthening churches to impact our communities for Christ. You can find out more about Beta Upsilon Chi by transliterating our Greek letters and adding a .org. That's byx.org. We are produced, rather well I might add, by the good gentlemen of the Good Podcast Company. For Beta Upsilon Chi, I'm Dr. Jared Musgrove with Man to Men.